Here's a truth most people don't want to believe. Simple words can control the human heart. Not beauty, not wealth, not even intelligence. Just a few words spoken at the right moment with the right energy can make someone think about you all day, crave your presence, or even rewrite the story they were telling themselves about love. Sound manipulative maybe, but it's not manipulation if it's honest. It's connection, and connection is what we're all starving for. Most of us go through life thinking we have to prove ourselves, be funnier, more successful, more charming to be remembered. But the truth, people don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. And in the next 20 minutes, you're going to understand why just 3 simple words can trigger something so deep in someone's subconscious that it changes how they see you forever. This isn't a pickup trick. This is psychological warfare with empathy, a way of speaking that doesn't chase but pulls, not through effort but through emotional gravity. Before we dive in, I want you to ask yourself one question. When was the last time someone said something so real, so subtle, so unexpected, that it echoed in your mind for days? If you can't remember, then this video might just change the way you communicate with everyone, from the person you want to love you to the people who barely notice you. 1. The psychology behind powerful words. Why you and me works like a charm. Have you ever sat across from someone and said everything right, and yet somehow it all fell flat? You smiled. You asked about their day. You kept the conversation flowing. But when they walked away, it was like you'd never been there at all. Why do some people linger in our minds, while others vanish within minutes? Why can a single sentence said in passing haunt us for days, while hours of polite small talk dissolve like fog? The answer doesn't live on the surface. It lives deep below, in a part of us that speaks in symbols, not syllables. And to touch that place, you don't need to be perfect. You need to be felt. The unconscious doesn't listen to logic. Carl Jung, one of the founding voices of modern psychology, once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." We like to believe we are creatures of reason, but most of what moves us, what draws us in or pushes us away, doesn't come from logic. It comes from the unconscious, from that dark, mysterious ocean beneath our awareness, where ancient instincts, emotional wounds, and mythic patterns swirl together like tides under the moon. When you speak to that part of someone, their inner story, their symbolic mind, you bypass the filters. You don't ask for their attention, you summon it. And sometimes the door to that world opens not with paragraphs, but with 3 simple words. You and me. You and me as a symbol. Not a statement on the surface, it's nothing, just a phrase. But beneath the surface, it's an invitation. A seed planted in the imagination. You and me isn't a request. It's not even a question, it's a vision. A moment already half-formed, already shared. Think about it. Do you want to go out with me? Asks for permission. You and me should go out this weekend. Offers a story, a reality, a glimpse into what could already exist. The unconscious mind responds to imagery, and in this small phrase, it sees togetherness, choice, partnership. Even if the person you're speaking to doesn't consciously notice the shift their body does. Their breath changes, their guard softens. They feel something stir, even if they can't name it. The echo of archetypes. In Jungian psychology, the unconscious is populated by archetypes, universal characters, and patterns that live inside all of us. The hero, the lover, the child, the shadow, the wise one, the trickster. When you speak in symbols, you awaken those archetypes. You and me touches the lover archetype, not in a romantic cliche, but in a deeper way. It hints at union, at the sacred dance of duality. It says, I see a possibility in you, and I'm not afraid to name it. This activates something powerful, because most of us go through life longing to be seen beyond the surface, not just as a role we play, but as someone worthy of being chosen, not by accident, but with intention. A short story, The Barista. A woman walks into her favorite coffee shop, She's been coming here for months. She knows the barista's name. They've exchanged smiles, playlists, and small moments. One morning, instead of the usual, she walks up to the counter, looks him in the eye, and says with a soft grin, "You and me, we need to finally settle this. Is your coffee actually good or just addictive?" He laughs. But something else happens too. A flicker of surprise, curiosity, a pause. In that moment, she didn't just order coffee. She invited him into a scene, a shared story, one that now lives inside both of them. She didn't ask for a date. She suggested a world in which they already exist together. That's the kind of moment the unconscious remembers. What this really means. We spend so much energy trying to impress, crafting perfect profiles, memorizing conversation starters, analyzing text responses. But the truth is, you don't need to impress, you need to imprint. The right words at the right time, spoken with presence, don't just create attraction, they create memory. And memory is the birthplace of longing. So ask yourself, what kind of conversations are you planting? Are your words just noise, forgettable, transactional? Or are they seeds, small, intentional echoes that linger in someone's inner world? Because when you learn to speak not just to someone, but into them, everything changes. And that leads us to something even more mysterious. What exactly happens inside someone when they hear those words, not just once, but in the perfect moment? Let's explore that in part 2. 3 layers of connection, emotion, image, and suggestion. 3 layers of connection, emotion, image, and suggestion. Have you ever met someone who didn't say much, but somehow you couldn't stop thinking about them? Not because of what they wore, not because of how they looked, but because of how they made you feel. There was something in their presence, a warmth, a rhythm, a subtle gravity pulling you in without a sound. Most of us think connection is built through clever words, but real connection, it lives in what's unspoken, the undercurrent beneath the words. When someone says "you and me," and it lands, it's not just because the phrase is unusual. It's because whether they realize it or not, they've activated 3 layers of psychological resonance. Emotion, image, suggestion. Let's explore them slowly, intimately, so you can begin to feel the shift within yourself. First, emotion, the anchor of memory. We do not remember facts. We remember how people made us feel. That's not poetry, that's neuroscience. A neutral phrase like, "How was your day?" may be polite, but it doesn't stir anything deep inside. It passes through the mind like air through an open window. No friction, no trace. But when someone says "you and me" would make dangerous conversation, something happens. A flicker of emotion rises, playfulness, intrigue, maybe even desire. The nervous system responds. The mind pays attention. Carl Jung said that emotion is the thread by which the unconscious weaves meaning. Without emotion, there is no imprint, no meaning, no memory. So when you speak, ask yourself, are you transferring data or are you transferring feeling? Because words only matter if they carry emotion in their hands. Second, image, the language of the unconscious. Close your eyes for a moment and say, "You and me on a rooftop arguing about jazz and philosophy." Can you see it? That's the power of image. The unconscious mind doesn't speak in words. It speaks in pictures. "You and me" works because it doesn't just describe something. It implies a scene. It paints a picture with no brush. It says, we already exist somewhere. Maybe not here, maybe not yet, but the image is alive. This is why advertising works. Not because it lists benefits, but because it places you inside a moment, smiling, holding the product, becoming the person you want to be. When you say "you and me" in the right way, you're doing the same thing. You are placing someone inside a mental movie where they are with you, they belong, they matter. And once someone can see themselves in your story, they're no longer evaluating you, they're already participating. Third suggestion, the quiet power of not asking. This is where most people misunderstand language. They think impact comes from asking boldly or stating directly. But real influence, it doesn't come from volume, it comes from invitation. You and me doesn't beg, it doesn't plead, it doesn't even request. It simply suggests, and that paradoxically is what makes it powerful. When you suggest instead of ask, you do three things. You keep your dignity, you leave space for curiosity, and you create a mystery the other person wants to solve. It's the difference between saying, "Do you like me?" versus "You and me, we might be trouble." The first puts the other person in a position of power. The second puts you both in a story. Suggestion bypasses resistance, it slides under defenses, and it whispers, "What if?" That whisper is where connection begins. A short story, The Stranger on the Train. There was a man who sat next to a woman on a long train ride. They spoke of nothing important weather books where they were going. She smiled, he listened. And just before he stood to leave, she looked at him and said, "You and me, we would have made interesting trouble." No phone number, no expectation, just that line. Years later, he still remembered her. Not because she asked for anything, but because she gave him something, a moment that lived beyond its edges. That's what suggestion does. It doesn't demand, it invites the mind to wander. And sometimes the imagination falls in love before the person ever does. What this means for you. So many people today are trying to be louder, funnier, more impressive, thinking that's how they'll finally be remembered. But the truth is quieter. To connect, you don't need to stand out. You just need to resonate. When your words carry emotion, paint an image, and leave space for suggestion, they echo in the other person, long after the conversation ends. Not because they were grand, but because they felt like truth whispered through a door, half open. So ask yourself, are your words chasing attention, or are they gently calling something deeper forward? In the next part, we'll go even further, because knowing the power of words is only half the story. What happens when they're misused, misread, or mistimed? How do you know when you're speaking too soon, too much, or not at all? Let's step carefully into that territory, into part 3, mistakes that kill the magic way. When you and me backfires. 3. Mistakes that kill the magic. When you and me backfires, there's something almost sacred about timing. You can have the perfect words, the right look, even the right person, and still lose the moment because you said the right thing at the wrong time. Just like a song sung off beat or a kiss leaned into too early, connection isn't just about what you say, it's when and how and why you say it. This is where most people fall. They hear something powerful like you and me and try to apply it like a spell, thinking it will unlock instant chemistry, instant interest, instant intimacy. But magic doesn't work like that, and neither does the unconscious. Let's talk about the moments where you and me doesn't seduce but repels, not because it's a bad phrase, but because the energy behind it is misaligned and the delivery betrays the intention. Mistake 1, saying it too soon. We live in a culture of impatience, swipe, match, message, escalate. But the unconscious doesn't move on demand. It moves when it feels safe, when it feels seen, when the atmosphere allows it to emerge without pressure. When you say you and me should go out this weekend to someone you've only known for 5 minutes, you're not creating intrigue. You're skipping chapters. You're pushing someone into a story they haven't agreed to enter yet. And when people feel rushed, they don't lean in. They pull away. Jung spoke often of the process of individuation, that unfolding of the true self over time. Connection is part of that process. It cannot be forced without fracturing it. So if you're tempted to use this phrase before trust is even born, ask yourself, is this intuition or is this anxiety trying to hurry what should unfold slowly? Mistake 2, needing a reaction. This is perhaps the most invisible mistake and the most damaging. You say it, you and me, we'd be dangerous together. And then you wait. You watch their face too closely. You scan for approval. You hope for a smile, a spark, anything. But here's the truth. The moment you need a reaction, you've already lost your center. The magic of suggestion lies in detachment. It whispers, it wanders, it waits, it never begs. The unconscious mind is highly sensitive to energy. It can smell desperation even under perfume and perfect grammar. So the most powerful way to say you and me is to say it with the full awareness that you don't need it to land, that your worth is not riding on 3 words, that you're already whole with or without their response. That's the paradox of power. You create attraction by not needing it. Mistake 3, overusing the phrase. Like anything rare and beautiful, the more you use it, the less it matters. If every interaction becomes a variation of "you and me should hang out," "you and me would be great together," "you and me should try that restaurant," you're not building mystery. You're building a pattern, one that loses all emotional voltage. The unconscious does not respond to repetition. It responds to resonance. One spark well placed can burn in someone's mind for days, but 5 forced sparks, they fizzle. They don't seduce, they suffocate. Use the phrase like perfume, not paint, a trace, a suggestion, a single note that stays behind after the song ends. A cautionary tale. The girl who tried too hard. There was a woman brilliant and magnetic who had heard this advice. She loved the phrase "you and me" and used it in every conversation. She was confident, charismatic, but something didn't click. One night, a man she liked said this to her: "You're amazing, but it always feels like you're trying to make a moment happen. And that makes me wonder if you actually believe you're worth one." She realized then it wasn't the words that were wrong, it was the energy underneath. Her need to be remembered had become louder than her ability to simply be. And people feel that difference. They feel when a phrase comes from truth and when it comes from fear. So how do you avoid these traps? The answer isn't in control. It's in presence. Say less, watch more. Listen to the moment, not just to your lines. And when you speak, let it be a ripple from a still center, not a wave crashing from need. You and me isn't a magic wand. It's a mirror. It reflects your confidence, your calm, your clarity. If you use it with authenticity, it becomes a doorway. But if you use it with anxiety, it becomes a wall. So ask yourself next time you feel the words rising, is this a whisper from my intuition or a shout from my insecurity? Because one connects. The other pushes away what it most desires to hold. And that leads us into something equally powerful but often overlooked. What if you and me could do more than spark romance? What if it could transform every relationship in your life? Let's open that door together in Part 4, Beyond Romance, how you and me builds trust in everyday life. 4, Beyond Romance, how you and me builds trust in everyday life. Not every connection is romantic. Not every conversation needs to end in longing. But every human being, whether they admit it or not, is looking for the same thing. To feel included, to feel chosen, to feel like they matter. This is why you and me doesn't belong solely in the realm of flirtation. Its power is much broader, much quieter, and perhaps even more needed in the spaces where no one thinks to use it. Because trust at its core is not built through grand gestures. It's built through small, intentional moments of recognition. Moments where you say, without saying, "I see you, I believe in us." Even if it's just for this one shared task, this one idea, this one fleeting conversation. We're in this together. That is what you and me offers. Not pressure, but partnership. You and me as a bridge in everyday relationships. Think of a workplace. You're in a meeting. Tension is rising. A deadline's been missed. Someone throws out a generic line. We all need to do better. It falls flat. No one feels responsible. No one feels inspired. Now imagine a different voice. You and me, we can fix this before Friday. Let's map it out. Suddenly everything shifts. Responsibility becomes shared. The other person isn't blamed. They're invited. You've placed them beside you, not across from you. That's the difference between compliance and commitment. A short story, The Father and Son. There was a father who barely spoke to his teenage son. Their conversations were surface-level stiff. Each lived in a different world. One night, after a quiet dinner, the father turned to him and said, "You and me, we've got some catching up to do, don't we?" The son didn't reply, not with words, but something shifted in his body. The wall didn't fall, but it cracked. That sentence wasn't a demand. It wasn't a guilt trip. It was a door slightly opened, no pressure to walk through. And that's how trust begins, not with force, but with gentle presence. Why this phrase builds connection. There's a reason you and me feels intimate, because it creates a subtle container, a sense of shared space. It says, we are not strangers. We are not separate. In this moment, we are together, even if only for a flicker. And that flicker is enough to build something on. Carl Jung spoke of relational archetypes, those ancient inherited patterns of human bonding. In friendships, the ally. In teams, the collaborator. In family, the witness. These archetypes are activated not by logic or explanation, but by language that feels personal. You and me activates those roles. It awakens the internal memory of what it feels like to be chosen not as a project, but as a person. When you say it outside of romance, you say, "I see you." We're all tired of surface talk. We're tired of vague invitations, corporate politeness, scripted exchanges. You and me need to talk this week. You and me could make this idea work. You and me should grab lunch. Just us. These aren't romantic, but they're real. They cut through noise. They build bridges. They say, "You're not part of the crowd. You're part of something I care about." And that's what every relationship needs: intimacy without agenda, closeness without expectation, words that feel like hands gently offered, not contracts waiting to be signed. So why don't more people use it? Because we're afraid. Afraid to be misunderstood, afraid to sound too forward, afraid to reveal that we care. But hiding behind safe language comes at a cost: disconnection, loneliness in the middle of interaction, relationships that never quite move beyond function into feeling. When you dare to say you and me in everyday spaces, you rehumanize the conversation. You remind people what it feels like to matter. That's not manipulation, that's medicine. So maybe now, when you sit with your colleague or text a friend or speak to your child, you'll pause and ask, is there a small place here where you and me might soften the air, might turn routine into resonance, might turn distance into we? Because this phrase, when spoken with sincerity, does more than connect, it heals. And that brings us to something even deeper, because words, even powerful ones, don't exist in isolation. They are carried by posture, by tone, by the silent language of the body. Let's step into that next, in Part 5, Embodying the Words. Confidence, body language, and inner power. 5. Embodying the words: confidence, body language, and inner power. Words are not enough. Even the most beautiful phrase spoken without presence becomes hollow. It may reach the ears, but it will never touch the heart. Because people don't just listen to what you say. They feel how you say it. They sense who you are when you say it. This is where many fall short. They learn the technique. They memorize the phrase. They even practice the tone. But something still feels off. Why? Because their body doesn't believe what their mouth is saying. Your body speaks before you do. Long before your words arrive, your posture arrives, your breath arrives. Your presence walks in first and speaks its own language. Crossed arms, hunched shoulders, eyes darting for approval. All of it whispers, I'm unsure, I'm small, I'm hiding. Now imagine this instead: a calm breath, relaxed shoulders, a steady gaze that doesn't demand but offers, a smile that isn't trying to charm but simply reflects inner ease. Now when you say you and me, it lands differently, not as a request, but as a truth already felt. Carl Jung said, "The body expresses what the soul cannot say." and sometimes it also betrays what the soul is trying to fake. Confidence is not a performance, it's a return. Real confidence doesn't strut, it doesn't seek attention, it doesn't speak loudly or perform like a mask. True confidence is quiet clarity. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. When your inner world and your outer presence are in sync, you don't have to try. You are. And that energy is magnetic. Because deep down, people don't crave perfection. They crave authentic certainty. Someone who stands in themselves without apology. Someone whose words feel rooted, not rehearsed. A story of stillness. The woman at the gallery. She was standing alone at an art exhibit, not dressed to impress. No loud laughter, no crowd around her. But people noticed her. Why? Not because of her beauty, but because of her stillness. When someone approached her and asked what she thought of the painting, she simply said, "You and me could stare at this forever and still not agree on what it means." She didn't smile, she didn't giggle, she just held the gaze unbothered, unworried. And it worked. Not because of the line, but because of how complete she seemed in herself. That kind of calm is disarming. It opens doors without knocking. How to cultivate that energy? This isn't about faking calm. It's about becoming familiar with your own silence. Start noticing how you breathe when you're about to speak. Where you place your eyes not to dominate, but to connect. Whether your body contracts or expands when you're vulnerable. Practice saying your truths in the mirror, not to perform, but to witness your own presence. Speak slower than you think you need to. Let pauses live between words. Let the space around your sentence carry part of its meaning. Because silence, when paired with intention, becomes a form of music. And in that music, the words "you and me" transform into something unforgettable. The real power is not in the phrase. It's in you. You and me is not a trick. It's not a weapon. It's a reflection of your state of being. When spoken with insecurity, it repels. When spoken with quiet confidence, it attracts. But when spoken with grounded presence, it awakens. Awakens what? The recognition that in a world of noise, someone just said something real and meant it. That someone was you. So now the question isn't, how do I say it right? The question is, can you be still enough to let the words carry your truth? Can you trust that who you are, without reaching, without shrinking, is already enough? Because once you do, you won't need perfect timing, you won't need approval, you won't even need the phrase. You will speak, and the room will listen. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence whispered something the world rarely hears. I am not performing for you. I am already complete, and if you wish, you may meet me there. So where does this journey leave you? With a question, a quiet one. One that doesn't need an immediate answer. What if every conversation, every encounter, every word was a chance to remind someone that they belong, that they are already part of something even before they realize it? What if you and me wasn't just a phrase, but a philosophy? Maybe it's time to find out. So here we are. After all the stories, the science, the silence behind the words, it comes down to something simple. Words shape reality, and how you say them shapes how people experience you. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't need to memorize lines or chase validation. You just need to speak from the place inside you that is undeniably real. Because in the end, connection doesn't come from effort. It comes from presence. And maybe it begins with 3 small words whispered. Not as strategy, but as truth. You and me. A phrase, a mirror, a key. So now I invite you quietly but clearly. If someone has ever made you feel unforgettable with nothing but a phrase, share that moment in the comments. Let your memory become someone else's awakening. And if you're ready to become that person for someone else, start with 3 words. Say them with intention. Say them with grace. Say them not to impress, but to connect. You and me. That's where the shift begins.